I'm Chris Stafford, and I'm back with another series of The Horse Show. And this is where you'll hear from some of the best riders in the world from the Olympic sports, and the experts too. And one of those who knows exactly what's going on in the sport of eventing is the legend herself, Lucinda Green. So who better to help us understand what the implications are of the new Olympic format and what it means to the future of the sport. It's long past time we caught up, Lucinda. How are you?
I'm very well, and I agree. We haven't seen you or spoken to you for a very long time.
I know, and we need to know what's going on in the world of eventing. So we turn to you because you always have an opinion, and a valid one.
Some would be fairly fed up with that opinion.
But it's noteworthy nonetheless because of the experience that you have and watching the sport evolve as it has. Let's begin with that elephant in the room, the change once more to the Olympic format, Lucinda. Is this going in the right direction still? We seem to be condensing the sport more and more.
I'm quite glad I'm not in charge, but I'm pretty disappointed that I feel completely unable to make any influence whatsoever on anybody. I still believe the Olympics should be the best of the best, and I think Rio, although I think there was plenty of criticism of the course being too tough on the horses, it wouldn't have taken much to have made it an absolutely first-class course, which would have still reaped the results that it did. And it surprised everybody, your team, our team, Australians' team, everybody's team, that the cross-country was actually going to bring something to bear, because it hasn't really done. And Hong Kong might have done, but it was done arbitrarily to 8 minutes, whether the weather was bad or not, and it turned out to be okay. But 8 minutes was what it had been decided months before, but kept in big secret. So that didn't have the same exertion on the results as the Rio cross-country had. We've suffered a pretty disappointing Athens, I mean really disappointing, a sort of two-star, if you were lucky, course. It went straight the way up and turned round at the top, a 180-degree turn, where darling Ingrid Klimke, who at that point wasn't riding as brilliant as she is now, fell over on the flat on the only serious turn there was, and then came all the way back again. And by the time they got about three from home, Andrew Nicholson and Andrew Hoy, I think both stopped at a very innocuous bank and rail. I can't quite remember. I think they'd just gone to sleep. So we don't want things like that, really. We don't want cross-country courses that are just two-star level. We've been given this situation that the Olympics has got to come down to three-star. So if you want the Olympic Games to be the best in the world, then you categorically change the sport, because then the four-star becomes obsolete. So then we hear, oh no, it won't, that the four-star will get some championship type of Ironman thing going, and a world champion four-star will be developed somehow. There's lots of talk going on. I've no idea how far they've got down that line. But all the four-star organisers are very keen, obviously, to nail their colours to the mast. They don't want to be pushed into the background any more than we don't want them to be. So then you have a situation that could easily develop, although the FAI may think better of it, that you have a level above the Olympics that is way more difficult and more elitist than the level required at the Olympics. Well, it doesn't make any sense to me, because the Olympics is meant to be the best of the best, and it is, as far as I understand, in every other sport. And just because there's maybe some shorter people wanting to do basketball, you don't bring the rim to a lower height. The rim stays at whatever it is, and if you're too small, you don't play basketball. And it all turns up in the sort of FEI taking the Olympic advice that we've all got to get more universality, we've got to get more people watching us, we've got to get more airtime, we've got to be more understandable to the general masses. So basically, we've got to corrupt, I think, our sport if we want to stay in the Olympics. But I think they've gone over the top. I just don't see why they can't go on as we had at Rio, with a four-star that we know perfectly well is going to have a three-star route around it, so that you can get your new nations, as we saw in Rio, some of the great rides from the Russian and the South American, I can't remember which country it was now, and the Zimbabwe girl. And they survived. Okay, they were a minute or so slow, but they got round, and they got round really well. I don't see what was wrong with that format, and yet it's been taken away. And I think that is really, really sad, because if you can't aspire to the very best at the Olympic Games, where are you going to aspire? Okay, you're going to aspire at some four-star world championships. But then before you know it, the Olympic IOC surely is going to look up and say, oh, So your sport has got a higher level than what we're doing in the Olympics. Well, we certainly don't want you in the Olympics then. I think we shot ourselves in the foot. Because I think they're looking for, everybody thinks that, who knows, but everybody thinks they're looking for excuses to get us gone because we aren't quite universal enough, not quite enough countries, and we cost a hell of a lot. And we're elitist. You know, it costs them a lot and it costs us a lot to get our horses. So I think it probably is true to say that the Olympics are looking to be shot of us and have been for probably as long as I've been in it. I think now they're about to be handed on a plate, because if we do run with a 4-star world championships every 2 years or every 4 years or whatever, it's going to dawn on them that the best level is no longer at the Olympic Games, and that's not what the Olympics is all about. So that's where I've got to.
What price do you think this is going to have on the sport, though, if that happens? As you said, this is nothing new, that we've seen this coming, the eventual demise of the sport in the Olympic format. Do you think we're almost there and there's going to be a price that the sport has to pay for this that's going to affect the sport wider, or do you think we can retain our integrity at World Championship and the higher levels of the sport without the Olympics?
No, we can't, because it was decreed in whenever the general meeting was it November, that the Olympics and the World Championships would both be dropped to 3-star. And that was the absolute bullet between the eyes, because I think we could all accept that the Olympics was going to be classified lower, and why, but we absolutely can't accept not having, once in the 4-year cycle, the very best of the best, even if it's Michael Young for the next 12 years. You've got to have that, and it's just ridiculous saying it's going to be a 3-star. The whole art and skill of cross-country riding comes to its zenith at 4-star, and there's a great deal of people that can hack it at 3-star, but very few people are good enough to hack it at 4-star, and they have to work at it and they have to learn it. And that's what it should be about, not just about endless circles, as I've been saying for 30 years, and more bigger show jumping and more careful horses, which are ultimately not as brave and therefore are more likely to make a mistake across country because they are too careful. And it's a real worry. It's totally set the balance of the sport astray by putting the cross-country down to a 10-minute 3-star. And I have a horrible feeling they've made it so that the fences can come up quicker. And we have that in the ERM, the Event Riders Masters. The fences come up very quickly, and I think it's too quick. I think horses are still horses, and they can be trained to an extraordinary degree, but they also need time for their brain to recalibrate between all the things that they're asked. And the ERM only goes on for a couple of miles and 6-7 minutes or whatever it is, but the CCI format of the Olympics, I believe, has got as many efforts as the ERM, but goes on for 10 minutes and nearer 4 miles. So I don't think it's necessary, but it's a way of trying to make the cross-country more difficult without actually having the height more difficult, or the difficulty of the actual fences. It's just they've gotten such a muddle, I think. I think they have been faced with a very, very difficult situation, which is primarily they've got to stay in the Olympics. And there's plenty of us who are not so sure that that was such a wise thing to have at the background. But there's an awful lot of jobs all around the world in governing bodies that are paid for by government funding of some description in each country. And as soon as the sport was dropped from the Olympics, that government funding would go. So people are fighting for their own lives more really than the sport's life. And I think that's one of the real tragedies. Because in a sort of neutral world, how much do we need the Olympics? Tennis did very nicely without it. It's been pulled into it, and it's ridiculous. Golf's been pulled into it, and they don't want to play. So we're in it, and if we were out of it, how much does it really matter? Well, it matters one hell of a lot for the people whose livelihoods are born from government funding, which is only going to be given to Olympic sports in countries all over the world. So straight away you've got a difficult situation there where you're not going to be solely dealing with the benefit of the sport.
Do you think there's any way to salvage what we have? Do you think evolution of the sport or sports in general will, in time, mean that we will circle back when eventually, maybe beyond our lifetimes, they'll see that this was wrong. They made a mistake. They've shot themselves in the foot. In order to stay in the games, we've got to position ourselves in the sport a lot better than we are doing and not destroy it.
Yes, I think it'll be very difficult because you've only got to mention the word safety and everybody runs for cover because nobody can fight it. And this is one of the many things that have gone wrong in this last 20 years in the sport, that safety has become such a big and important thing that the weakest man in the room of a meeting of directors has got to say, but that's not, only got to mention that's not safe. And none of the others can contradict him because we know perfectly well nothing about horses or competing in them. So it's given rise to a situation where it's been very difficult for a leader to be a real leader, because to be a real leader, you've got to say, too bad, life isn't safe. And from what I can see, nobody's been prepared to do that as yet another death happens and another. We blame the fences, we blame the courses, we blame this, we blame that, but there's really 99% of the blame is only on one thing, riders. And we aren't ourselves to take that responsibility. Is rider error on nearly every single occasion. It's incredible bad luck, very, very occasionally. And we've got to develop a better understanding of the sport and art of cross country. We had it to a degree, but only a small amount of people at the higher end. And I think one of the reasons we didn't kill people in the earlier days was because the fences were not so solidly built. As a matter of interest, the post hole digger only came in the 90s. Up until then, they were dug in by hand. They were never dug in very far, and they all rocked a little bit if they crashed into them. And you still fell over. You still somersaulted, but you never saw those terrible rotationals with the high legs in the air directly above your head. You never saw that because the solidity of the fences was not so great as it is now. If you go with a good course builder now and watch, you'll find the posts going in 3, 4, 5 feet. You could live in the structures that are built for us to jump. And therefore, when a horse does hit a fence, which of course happens because mistakes are made by riders, it doesn't give one single centimetre and therefore becomes a pivot pole for a horse to rock it round. And that's where I believe the development of the rotational fall has come from, which just didn't exist before. And I've been wittering on about this for many years, but I'm not getting much. You just find there's terrifically deaf ears up there, and I think you're trying to change something that's already taken root. You know, the course builders are now paid, people that are paid annual salaries to build courses. It's within their interest that fences don't break, or they aren't going to get asked back the next year. There's plenty of other course builders. So in a ridiculous sort of capsule, you've got course builders' wages versus riders' lives, because nobody wants to build the fence like they used to be built, where they were a great deal less solid and they moved. But none of us realise this, but I see it now when I'm training on what I call normal fences that aren't dug into the ground 3, 4 and 5 feet. I often see, I think I've seen 5 falls that I felt were really horrific in 20, 30 years teaching. And each one of them has been saved because the fence has moved. And 3 of them were fences that were mobile and not pinned down. And because that fence moved, that person stumbled into complete rotation and they survived. And I've seen another couple that were bedded in the ground, but when I went and looked where the legs of fence were in the ground, they'd made quite a movement in the ground. There was an inch or two either on the far side of each leg, indicating that the fence had given. So I think there's an awful lot in it, but it's not getting heard. And there we go, you know. I think it's ended up leading us, this fact that we have built these fences good enough to be able to live in. It's ended up leading us to the situation we've got to with the downgrading of the cross-country in the Olympics, which I find an absolute tragedy because we know where it's going to lead. We know it's going to lead to bullying of the dressage horses, and there's some very, very good dressage riders out there. There's a couple of them in your country, a couple of them in France, and them in Germany, but there are only about 10 of them in Germany at that level and ride beautiful dressage. The rest of the world doesn't ride dressage in the way that those boys do. So the horse has been given a pretty hard time, what I would call alias torture, but that's sort of a figure of speech, basically dominated and become, if you like it, learned helplessness, which isn't the way you want a horsemanship. So the less the cross-country features up the level of dressage will go, and show jumping too. So here the witter of 4-time changes and everything else. Well, the horse has got so brilliantly trained if he's going to listen to you to do such intricate dressage and still have his initiative about him. And in case like the riders that I have mentioned, but not by name, they and the rest of them will be saying, come here, come pulling their heads in. And it's just lost the balance. And the balance, I feel, is wrought by starting with a high level of cross-country, building up to it, but having it there as to be aspired to.
It sounds rather like a combined training test then, with some cross-country thrown in.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of way it's heading, and I'm sure it won't, but I think it depends on the balls of the designer who builds the next World Games, which is Mark Fitt. Depends on the balls of the next one that builds the Olympics, which is your guy. But, they've also got rules to stay within. When the Kiwis, who are such non-whingers, they're really the rest of the world, they came back from Rio, and they happened to end up in the same pub that we lunched, and we all had lunch together. And they just stole silver, bronze, and then eventually ended up fourth, which was pretty disappointing. It was a very, very good course. It was very tough. It was 3 nights. It was 4-star difficult if you wanted to go the fourth. And not a whinge from any of them. But what's wrong with that format? It's really depressing.
We saw in show jumping, Lucinda, the development of the Global Champions Tour, and unaffiliated, not affiliated to the FEI, and it grew to becoming a very prominent series of competitions with a lot of money involved. It now has morphed under the umbrella of the FEI. We see the event riding, the event riders masters that you mentioned earlier. That is evolving to being incredibly popular. Is that where do you think the sport will find new legs and grow and have its own popularity, if you will, maybe outside even the auspices of the FEI? Is that what it's going to take to keep the sport as vibrant as it needs to be without the Olympic format potentially?
What I want to know, and I don't know, is how it competed in the unaffiliated global championships for 40. If they found no way to punish them, then the sky is the limit. There's a system in this country that we can't qualify for anything and then affiliate and compete in affiliated events. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. We have to affiliate. And the global tour was taken out of the SEI auspices. And maybe you're not aware of them either, but I'd be really interested to know whether they try to mete out punishment or B, why they came in under the FEI in the end.
Yes, that's another conversation, of course, and I think it's interesting to use as a model, though, to see where eventing could potentially go and what's going to keep it to, a prominent sport, ensure its survival at the highest level and the most exciting, spectator-friendly, media-friendly, sponsor-friendly, and finding the prize money that needs to sustain it, of course. So that actually leads me on to the Nations Cup format as well. I wanted to get your take on the Nations Cup format because that's going now another year. It seems to be hugely popular. Is this going to be the support structure going forward then for the Olympic format? Can the FEI turn around and say, well, the Nations Cup format works, so this is the only choice if you're going to stay in the Olympics that we continue with that CIC format?
It's virtually that Olympic format is probably 3 minutes less on the circuit, and the CIC circuit is 3 starts are really excellent for people who haven't made it to the very top. And sometimes still people who have made it to the top will bring a young horse and put themselves or get put onto that team. So anything that gives a chance to feel they're representing their country, in other words, a certain level, is huge because there's really very, very little reward in this. There's no money reward. There's very, very little kudos reward because there's always so many people better than you. So I think it's a wonderful, and the fact that the IC format, well, why not? You can, if you like, fit more events in, but of course there goes the next problem. Too much King and the Horse events stay silent, and it's the fine old line, isn't it? And when there's 10, I think there are now, being shipped around the world to do the CIC Nations Cup. I'm not quite sure where it's going to come from, though, because we, for one, not having one, have lost quite a bit of our funding.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, of course, is the key, as you said, to underpinning the sport in the Olympic format. I wanted just to get your take on the recent meeting that took place in Ireland on the FEI's Event Risk Management Summit. That apparently was very successful. It had a whole host of really experienced attendees there. What did you get from that, Lucinda?
Yes, I didn't sadly go. I was teaching in Australia, but I was for once I was invited, which was really good, only probably because I've been making such a noise. And I did speak to Mark Phillips about it, who said it was very helpful. Quite a lot of lessons had been learned, which is a continuing thing. You'll never ever know it all. And these put in recommendations, if there are recommendations, which all need to be read by various people that are designing. And he felt it was very, very constructive and informative. So I think it sounds like a big success. There's been another meeting going on in Lucinda of the 6 S2E1 4 stunts. Organisers have been discussed where to go with the Olympics having brought the level down. So that I haven't heard yet. I will find out what's going on that one. That was a meeting with the FAI.
Well, of course, we have to stay ever vigilant in the sport, right, with all the safety issues and concerns and horse welfare, of course. So I think all bodes well that those in the know are keeping us in the know of what is developing within the walls of the FEI on risk management.
Definitely.
Of course, European Championships this year, Lucinda. Euro Championships. I'm wondering, is Lissa, your daughter, she seems to be on a roll now, is she going to be heading to onto a team anytime soon?
She absolutely, her ambition is to get onto a next cup team, and she's got one horse that could possibly be good enough if they go as well as they went last year. So it could be very exciting. She would be a step off the level, which would be the European Championships. She would be after the experience in the nation teams first, and I think that would be exciting. But it just takes one punch, and she's back down to the young horses and has nothing in her future sight. So it's the same story with all of them. That's why the top boys have only 5 horses running, because one puncture and everything's gone if you're relying on one horse. But as you know, it takes many, many years to make a good horse, and they can puncture on the way in various different ways. So it's terribly exciting. She's absolutely loving it. There's no way I can get her off the whole idea of eventing, which I suppose is surprising considering mum and dad. But I did hope I would be bad at it. Luck.
Yeah, she certainly has got the bug now. She really is so enthusiastic about it. It's absolutely wonderful to watch her.
No, she's got the bug, and it's a tremendous service in many ways, because you have to have different levels of ability and talent, organisation, and there's so much. The riding is such a all they have to manage. These modern riders who are having to rely on them and sponsor them and everything else. So she's learning all sorts that she probably would never have learned if she didn't have the horses. So it's great so far. As long as she doesn't get squashed, I'm happy.
Absolutely. All right, what are you up to then?
A lot of teaching. Trying to develop the higher level teaching, tremendous amount of teaching around the world at sort of 2-star below, and mostly what you would call training and lower than that to enjoy very much. And it's usually rather easy to help people at a lower level because there's such a big improvement to be made. It's less easy to help at level because it's such a nuance, it's such a fine tune, and some very, very little. But that is the area that I'm really fascinated in, the higher levels, because don't see it going as well as it should be going, and the net result is that the sport walked down because the riders aren't answering the questions. So instead of saying riders learn better and answer the questions, they get taken out. It happens again and again. The fence doesn't appear anymore, nor does that one, nor does that one. Actually, they're all perfectly okay. They just need to be learned how to race, and the horse needs to be trained how to approach and deal with them. So I'm very interested in that, and I'm trying to do more of that.
Are you still out there competing?
Yes, I've got a really, really nice horse. Lovely lady from the VEH stud in Victoria sent me to ride last summer because I'd seen it and loved him. Thoroughbred horse, you know me and my thoroughbreds. And then for various reasons, her rider, she has a stud and employs two riders. The rider, and she said, would I like to buy him? And I said, I can afford that. She said, well, I'd really love you to ride him. So between us, we are managing him, and it's a really exciting. He's definitely not ready to come out again yet. He had 3 super outings when he arrived, as they often do. And then they go, poof, I'm in a different hemisphere, and it's a summer coat I've got you now, and it's November. For some reason, November should be hot, it's freezing. And he's been quite thrown by and he's trying to grow a winter coat now. So we've just taken a different course now, and we're not going to hurry him until the spring gets him sort of coat right, looking good, and I'm no hurry. If it takes another 6 months, fine. I hope it doesn't another year. But great fun. He's only done 1 star, but of him, and I'd love to see how far together we can go. 1 star might be it, but I might not be good enough to go any higher. We will see.
Time will tell. Well, it sounds like you're keeping as busy as ever with your globe trotting and teaching. It's always good to catch up with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, anytime. But I was very, very concerned about this whole Olympic thing, as with so many people, and it just feels like you're beating your head against the wall.
Well, I hope there's some people are still listening, Lucinda, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. As always, we love to hear from you. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Chris. Lots of that.
And we would love to hear your thoughts too on the Olympic format, what's happening in the sport of eventing or in any other equestrian sport. You can post your comments on our Facebook page at Wisp Sports, and you'll find us on Twitter as well at Wisp Sports. There are many more conversations from around the world of women's sports, including hundreds of podcasts. That's all at wispsports.com. You can subscribe to this podcast and all the other podcasts that we produce here by going to iTunes and looking for Wisp Sports Radio in the iTunes podcast store. Until the next time, thanks for listening.